Hello, and welcome to UXDX Online. I hope you're as excited as I am for tonight's talks. But before we jump into those, I want to give a very quick introduction to UXDX and why we host these sessions. So at UXDX, our mission is to help companies shift from building software using waterfall or more commonly water scrumfall to really truly empowered autonomous product teams. And the reason why that's our mission is because in a high change environment, it's a much more efficient, effective, and sustainable way of building software. Now, I say high change because if you're just building a few projects a year, create a project team, disband them, move them somewhere else. But lots of companies I've worked in recently have literally hundreds of projects going on at any given time. So it doesn't make sense to have people moving around when you can have a team that really understands a section of the product, can iterate, get to know the customers, what their needs are, what the business needs are, and really kind of hit it out of the park in that area. Now, that's really easy to say, but it's very hard to do that kind of shift within a company. And that's where the talks come in. So no one talk is going to cover every aspect of the product development lifecycle, but we've asked people to come and share how they're changing their sections of what they're doing. And hopefully that will resonate with you and you can start thinking about how you could apply that in your context. And that's where the questions come in. So all of the speakers will leave some time at the end of their presentation so you can ask some questions. And you can do that whether it's on UXDX or if you're watching this through any of the other social channels. If you post your questions there, we'll collate those and we'll ask those questions to the speakers. Now, sometimes we can't get through all of the questions that come up, and that's where the UXDX community Slack group comes in. So any questions we don't have time to get through, we'll post those in there and we'll invite the speakers to come and answer them for you. But that's enough about me. You're not here to listen to me talk, so I'd like to introduce our first speaker for this evening. And our first speaker is Maren Hotvedt, who is the lead experience designer at Atlassian, and she'll be talking about piloting and scaling journey map operations at Atlassian. So I'd like to welcome Maren to the stage. Hi, Maren.
Hi, Rory, and thank you for that introduction. Yes, so I'm excited to talk about, I have slightly changed the title to Getting Started with Journey Map Operations, which I think is a more honest reflection of where we're at with this practice than scaling, but still I think a lot to learn. So to quickly introduce myself, I currently live in Boise, Idaho, which if you aren't familiar with US geography, is a place best known for growing a lot of potatoes. But I've had the chance to live and work in many locations, including Seattle, San Francisco, Sydney, and Austin before settling here. I have been in design for 9 years. I've worked as a UX designer, content designer, and more recently have really shifted into service design and focusing on strategic end-to-end customer journeys. And before that, I worked in consulting, sales, and marketing, which has been really helpful as a service designer in understanding how different parts of the business work and deliver experiences to customers. On the side, I'm also a debater on Atlassian's award-winning Work Check podcast, which is a very fun show that debates modern workplace practices, like whether it's okay to wear pajamas to a Zoom meeting. I am wearing slippers right now, but you can't see them. So, and last but not least, outside of work, I also love outdoors and spending time with my dog and partner. So besides potatoes, Boise is also an amazing mountain town with a lot of rivers, skiing and hiking outside my front door. A little bit about Atlassian as well, because I think this is really helpful context to understand the environment that I'm operating in. So our mission is to unleash the potential of every team, and we build best-in-class software tools like Jira, Confluence, and Trello, and then also share practices to improve team connection and performance. We are helping shape the future of teamwork and collaboration for over 250,000 global customers and millions of users. And we're distributed first company with over 10,000 global employees. But don't worry, that's all I'm going to talk about Atlassian. I'm not here to talk about our products or product design. I want to talk about service design and specifically how to make journey maps effective tools for transforming customer experience through something known as journey map operations, which is particularly helpful in environments like ours, where you have distributed teams and a lot of organizational complexity to deal with. So first off, what is journey map operations or journey map ops? Simply put, this is a way to use journey maps as visual, customer-centric management tools to connect organizational silos, align priorities, and see how every project impacts the customer experience, as well as your business metrics. One of the key concepts behind Journey Map Ops is understanding and communicating journeys at different levels of Zoom and within the context of a journey framework. So before I dive into our approach to implement Journey Map Ops, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about levels of Zoom. Journey Map Ops starts with understanding the big picture view, so seeing the forest and not the trees. Every business, no matter what industry you're in, has some high-level customer lifecycle that all work ladders up to. And this same lifecycle concept also applies to other groups, such as employees or partners. So where it says customer lifecycle, you can swap that out. But essentially, there is the canonical big picture journey. Within the end-to-end customer lifecycle, you also have sub-journeys, and some of these are still very broad and may represent months or even years of your customer's experience, which is why we call them macro journeys. And then within macro journeys, you have even smaller journeys that represent short interactions with your business. So with Journey Map Ops, over time, what you're doing is building up this view of your customer lifecycle at different levels of Zoom. And you're able to zoom in to focus on specific micro journeys or zoom out to look at the bigger picture. And when you zoom into the lower levels, it becomes easier for teams to see clear connections between their work. This could reveal overlapping work, often in teams where areas where multiple teams work on the same part of the customer lifecycle. So for example, you might have team 1, team 2, and team 3 all working on onboarding, but for different products and approaching that in different ways. So with Journey Map Ops, you can keep a hierarchy of up-to-date maps. You can build bridges between silos. So those silos could be teams, it could be disciplines like engineering, PM, design. You can visualize ownership to drive clarity. You can show the why behind key metrics. So explain why metrics are moving one way or the other when you pair that with a view of the customer experience. And you can easily access past research and projects and see what you have available and not reinvent the wheel. So even though there are a lot of benefits, implementing and running Journey Map Ops is also very resource intensive. So I wanted to shed light on why we at Atlassian are investing in piloting this approach. Before we started piloting this practice, we knew that some of our key customer journeys had a lot of room for optimization, but there were some organizational challenges that were preventing us from making big improvements. These could look like teams duplicating work, lack of clarity on who owned what, no visibility of other parts of the journey. So a team might be working, again, an example is onboarding, but not knowing what was coming before onboarding and awareness or discovery, and not knowing what was happening afterwards in terms of the product experience. We had regular rituals to review key metrics, but we didn't have the same for key journeys. And all of that was really resulting in a fragmented customer experience. After, we now have teams that are much more aware of one another's roadmaps and can coordinate projects effectively. Journeys have assigned owners. There's a shared understanding of the journey and not just the piece that each team works on. Journeys and metrics are reviewed together, and we're creating a more consistent customer experience. So let's assume that I've gotten you hooked, you're super excited, you think this is cool, you want to try it. As I've mentioned, implementing Journey Map Ops, even on a limited scale, requires a lot of coordination and buy-in from different teams. So finding the right area to pilot this in, the right leaders to support it, and right partners to help champion and accelerate the work is critical. To give some context, we started this work in earnest back in December, so roughly 5 months ago from when I'm speaking today, piloting in one area, and are just now rolling this out to a second area. So I'm going to talk through how we approached our pilot of Journey Map Ops in one area and what you can learn from our experience. And all of the work that I'm going to talk through was led by a team of 2, so myself and another lead designer working in tandem as partners. So simplifying things down, we approached this in 4 steps. The first thing we did was create our journey framework. Next, we prioritized the most important journeys. Then we mapped them in a consistent tool and template. And finally, we put in place the rituals we needed to regularly review them with key stakeholders and make sure they weren't just sitting, never looked at again after we did the mapping. So I'll dive into detail about step 1, creating our journey framework. The end state that we were looking for was something like this, where we had defined levels of Zoom and defined lifecycle stages. We started by looking at the lifecycle stages, and the first thing we did was an internal audit of different end-to-end journey work from across the business, and we looked at the stages that were being used. And we were looking for common patterns. So for example, again, onboarding was a phase that almost every end-to-end journey shared, and we then synthesized these into a recommended set of lifecycle stages. Next, we explored ways to define our levels of Zoom. And for this, we had to look outside of Atlassian at examples from folks like Nielsen Norman Group, Chris Risden, Mark Stickdorn, and others who are leading voices on this topic. And one thing I've observed is this is really sort of greenfield. There's very little standard way of thinking about levels of Zoom for different journey artifacts. But we came up with a model that we think works for us and landed on a synthesized version of the customer lifecycle stages and documented them along with definitions for levels of Zoom to help guide our teams. And when we tested these with internal users, we found that the more Zoom levels and lifecycle stages there were, the more ambiguity we introduced. So we started with a simple framework. And in retrospect, for the lifecycle stages, I would simplify this even further. But at that point, we had our outline in place, and it was time to start filling it in with journey maps. But obviously, we're not going to map every journey. That's not feasible, and it's definitely not necessary. So we needed to hone in on which parts of the customer lifecycle merited mapping and reviewing and why. So to do this, we worked with leaders in our org or department to prioritize 2 things. First, we work with them to prioritize an area of the customer lifecycle to focus on. So for us, this meant looking at the global business priorities and the department priorities, and then tying that to the relevant customer lifecycle stage. And then next, we needed to prioritize the actual journeys to look at and get more specific about the particular scenarios we were interested in and why. So this helped us not boil the ocean, but was also really important in identifying who to work with on the next step, which is mapping the journeys. I also want to call out, this is just an example visual to illustrate the concept, not the actual representation of what we were focused on. I don't want to get in trouble, but this is just an example. And so once we had agreement on where to focus on, it was time to actually map the journeys. And a key consideration here is what tool to use. So it's one thing to map a single journey, which I think is most often what people are doing, or maybe a set of related journeys. But when you're trying to map a system of interconnected journeys that you need many teams to contribute to and you want to scale over time, getting the tool and templates right is really important. So some of the factors you need to consider include licensing. So what is in your existing toolkit? Maybe you already have Mural and Figma, for example. You need to look at budget. So do you have budget for a new tool? Is it possible to get budget? You need to think about complexity and scalability. So how complex will your framework be? Are you talking about 5 journeys that you need to map and review regularly, or 500? This is a very different scenario. And then savviness. So how tech savvy are your contributors? So for example, Figma can have quite a high learning curve sometimes versus something like Miro or Mural that are more whiteboard tools. So thinking about the tool is definitely a step that you want to do early and think critically about. Alongside the tool, we also thought about our journey template. So we worked with our stakeholders to identify what information they needed to see at a minimum. So for us, There were some things that we looked at for consistency. So for example, how do we have consistent titles so that everything is easy to find? Same with metadata. The reason for that is to make things searchable and easy to find. And then we had the actual information. So what swim lanes did we need to include and why? How did we write the scenarios? How did we define the scenarios? And also, what research did we consult to create this journey map? And what types of research do we have available? So looking at quantitative, qualitative, and competitive also helps us see where we have research gaps for a particular journey. And then for each journey, we appointed a coordinator who's responsible for gathering information to fill it out from all of the contributors. And this can get pretty complicated, especially if you're looking at an end-to-end journey that comprises the work of many teams. So each part of our template has clear R&R with different roles responsible for different parts of the journey map. So for example, the journey coordinator is responsible for the end-to-end, and they would work with the designers from different teams to fill in the storyboard, analytics and PM to fill in metrics, research PMs and design to fill in insights, etc. So if your journey has a very large scope, identifying and coordinating these contributors can be, like I said, really complex. So just to give an example, last week we started mapping a set of 4 journeys, and so far we have 40 contributors and counting. So a lot of work for that journey coordinator, but in the end, we will have a consolidated view of the end-to-end journey that was not available before. All right, so at this point, you have your maps filled in, and now it's time to start your journey review sessions. And this is really, I think, where this practice diverges from my experience in the past, which has been you create a journey map, gets reviewed maybe once or twice, and then it gets put in a drawer and never looked at again. So this is a regular review and refresh of each prioritized journey. And like I said, this is really what makes journey map operations different than simply journey mapping. So at a high level, the review process that we planned for was schedule a review meeting, map the journey to be reviewed, or if this was, a second, third, fourth review, you refresh the journey, pre-record a walkthrough of the journey, fill out a basic template that has things like the link to the journey, link to the walkthrough, and then some questions we need people to reflect on. And then we would run the review and capture any feedback to action. And then we would rinse and repeat on a cycle that was defined by the journey. So for example, one journey that was really high priority and moving fast, you might review weekly, whereas something that is maybe a macro journey that doesn't need to be reviewed as often would have quarterly refresh. So, like I said, the first thing we did was schedule a review meeting with leaders from across the team that worked on that particular journey. And as I mentioned up front, we're a distributed company with people working across global time zones, which means everything we do often needs to be optimized for asynchronous collaboration. So we opted to, rather than do a walkthrough live, record a walkthrough of the end-to-end journey map and then have people reflect in their own time. So as the leadership team watched the walkthrough, we had them reflect on a set of questions about the journey, and these covered topics like how effective it was at helping users achieve their goals, how consistent the UX was, whether we had the right teams and projects in place to improve it, whether we had the right KPIs for the journey, etc. And so this review went well, we got good feedback, but afterward we were still struggling with, so what? Like, what do we do with this feedback? How do we action it across all of these different teams? There wasn't a clear path to closing the loop on the feedback. And then we got lucky. So only a few weeks later, we were able to take advantage of the opportunity to review the journey in person at an offsite. And with everyone together in one room, we could identify the accountable owners for each part of the journey and set up a working model to ensure that they could collaborate more closely. And so in the end, our process wasn't quite what we had imagined, but we were able to feed the information from the offsite back into the source of truth journey map. And now going forward, we can use journey reviews to show the impact each of these teams is having on the end-to-end journey. To keep the end-to-end journey map up to date, we have a lead designer dedicating a few days each month to gathering information from the contributors updating the map, and running a journey review. I think the key thing to emphasize here is that the journey review is part of a larger program of work dedicated to improving this end-to-end journey. So simply having the journey review was not enough. It's tied with this programmatic element that's outside of design. Early feedback that we've gotten on this work has been really positive, and one of my favorite pieces is just the simplicity of what we've done. It sounds very simple, but it really is a difference to what we had before, which was, before we didn't have the clear picture of the end-to-end view. All we had were slices, and we didn't know how they fit together. This same leader is really excited about this practice at Atlassian because for him, it's helping him identify where to deploy his people and teams, as well as where to pull back. And so he can use journey maps and journey reviews as a strategic tool to deliver better outcomes for the business and our customers. So what's next? Our goal is definitely to scale this practice across more areas of the customer lifecycle, but we are taking an incremental approach to get there. So the first thing we want to do is take what we've learned and try replicating it in another space. So pick another pilot area and then the third pilot area. By testing it in more areas, we're also getting to train more people on the practice and learning new tricks along the way. So we're kind of taking a train the trainer approach. And once we have high confidence that things are working well across multiple areas, our plan is to work with design ops on a standard playbook, not just for journey map ops, but for how to run a journey-centric program. And in 20 minutes, I can only scratch the surface on this topic. So I also want to leave you with a few of the people and resources that I have leaned on as we've explored journey map ops. The first is an article from Nielsen Norman. It's very short. You can go read this after the talk, on the practice of customer journey management. And this is the article that really started sparking my thinking about the idea that you should manage customer journeys like products. Really, really good article that stands the test of time. The next is one particular episode. These are very specific recommendations from the Service Design Show. This episode with Florian Vollmer is focused on similar work that he is leading to manage a complex database of connected customer journeys. And he's farther along than we are. So he has 100+ journeys that he's managing. And so listening to this helped me sort of project into the future at what could our journey map ops and journey management practice look like over time. And then last but not least, Mark Stickdorn, I believe, is the inventor of the term journey map ops. That might be wrong, don't quote me. But he has a ton of free resources available on this topic, as well as paid training and coaching to help you implement journey map ops. And I actually learned about this at one of his training courses, so can highly recommend that. But he also, like I said, has free videos, articles, lots of stuff to lean on to learn about journey map ops. And with that, thank you. And I think we have a couple minutes for questions, but I'll let Rory confirm.
Yeah, we do indeed. So first off, thank you very much for sharing. That was I haven't actually heard of journey map ops, so it's new to me.
It's hidden, it's secret.
Excellent. So thank you very much. And just a reminder to everybody out there, please feel free to write in your questions on whichever platform you're watching this on, and we'll share those with Maren. The first thing, though, that I have a question. I wasn't 100% sure. Are you creating like a master kind of map and everybody is contributing to it, or is everybody developing their own separate maps for what they need?
So we are creating a database of maps, and so there's two. So the database is thing one. Within the database, which is organized around the customer lifecycle, we have, I would say we have multiple master maps. So we have end-to-end journeys that kind of ladder up to this customer lifecycle, where multiple teams, like 10 teams, are contributing to that end-to-end journey. And so they're each plugging in their work to that master map that's part of this larger database of maps.
Okay, and
it's very systems. It's a system of maps.
Is the separation different products, or could it be that there are two master maps for the same product?
There could be. So for example, let me try to think of something. Let's say we have a totally different user experience in Asia than we do in Europe. You might have two separate maps to depict that experience, but for the same phase of the customer lifecycle. Or it could be by product. So onboarding is just the easiest example because I think everyone kind of groks it. You know, we have Jira, Trello, Confluence. They all have different onboarding experiences, different customer bases. And so that journey is going to look different. But at the same time, we want to be able to click in to say onboarding is a common phase for customers. What are the experiences we offer today? How consistent are they across multiple products? I don't know if that's fully answered your question, but
It has.
how we break it up is very much something we're still grappling with, I would say.
It's just I remember a talk from Verizon where they have what they call a mega map, and it's the entire kind of company has a single map that they're trying to maintain. And I think your approach is probably, from my perspective, probably a bit more scalable.
Yeah, it's much more of a database that's structured around a customer lifecycle, is how I would describe ours.
And just on that point, customer or user, do you distinguish?
Yes, I can give you our technical. So we consider customers the business entity, or like UXDX is a customer. Rory is a user. UXDX I would never refer to as like the user. So when we say we have millions of users, those are all part of customers.
But do you understand? Like, I guess, sorry, just where I'm coming from would be, like, let's say within a large company, you might have the IT department pay the bills, and they're the ones who decide, let's bring Jira in, or let's bring like something in. And then you have Rory, who's sitting here working on a project or something, and I'm the one using it. So do you have a distinction on that kind of sales versus usability side of things?
I mean, we certainly have archetypes and stuff like that. I would say those are both user types within a customer.
Probably different sections of the flow. Like, so at the
Yeah,
start, it's the more the person who's buying, and then later on, it's the user.
yeah, and oftentimes that's like the maps that we are creating are not limited to a single user. There's always multiple users involved, whether it's somebody requesting access to something and then that request goes to an admin, for example, or like you said, one group is responsible for the purchase, but then the people using the product is a different group. So we have to show all of that in what we're mapping.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question, but we certainly think of them as different groups.
And just a slightly different take, because you were, one of the examples you gave was that when the stakeholders look at it, they say, oh wow, I need more data on that, or like it kind of opens up insights. How do you share that? And I think it kind of ties in with the next talk. User journey maps are often perceived as kind of qualitative. Like, you might have, I saw the lines, that kind of the emotional journey as you're going through, and that's a very qualitative thing. So how do you actually tie in the quantitative data that, no, we've done the research, this is actually a problem here, or here's the data?
Yeah, so longer term, we actually, and I think this gets back to what tool you use as well. We are trying to integrate the tool we use with our actual system. So we have this idea of like funnel metrics. How does that tie to the customer journey, and actually pull that data in? In the short term, we are working with analytics, our partners in analytics, to actually map that data as insights. So for example, customer reaches this screen or this step, we know there's a 50% drop off. We're putting that in as an insight. That's, again, the short term. Ideally, we'd actually have it integrated with our analytics tools to be able to show here's how this customer journey is performing right now. That's the dream.
Right. I think if you turn that into a product, it'll be quite successful as well.
Yeah, great. We would use that.
Excellent. Well, I think that's all we have time for. So thank you very much for sharing, and I hope everybody out there enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Thanks. So up next, we have a team presentation, and we'll have Charlotte Cunningham, TJ Bowen, and Aaron Knoll, who are all product designers at Crafted, and they will be talking about mixed methodologies. So just what we finished up with there, qualitative and quantitative testing for user behavior analysis. So I'd like to welcome Charlotte, TJ, and Aaron to the stage. Hello.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, thanks for having us, Rory. We're really excited to speak about some user testing methods today. Like you mentioned, we're speaking to mixing methodologies. So we all know there's a lot of different ways to go about user testing. We think that all of them have their value and place in building a really high quality product. So we're going to look at what they are, why each type of testing is valuable, and then how you implement that both at the design team level and then at the organizational level. So I'm Charlotte Cunningham. I'm a product designer with a company called Crafted.
Aaron Knoll, product designer, also at Crafted.
Great. TJ Bowen, 10 years of product development experience. So I come from the product side. And the three of us all work at Crafted, a product development consultancy, where we believe that balanced teams of designers, engineers, and product working in tight collaboration and quick iterations, representing the UX perspective, feasibility, and business viability is the best way to build great products.
All right, jumping into the content. Why should you listen to us? Why? I'm sure we've all got experience with user testing. What insights are we bringing to the table? So from a consultancy, we bring a really unique perspective in that we've had the chance to bring positive impacts across a really wide range of industries. We've seen everything from startups to Fortune 200s and how implementing user testing goes at all the different levels, from legacy tech stacks to greenfield products. And across all of those, we've been able to deliver quality results with measurable positive impacts on whatever project we're working on. So some examples of this are, we had the chance to work with a really extensive A/B testing system at one client, and we saw the chance to deliver up to a 10% increase in purchase or conversion rate through a single test. And that was a really great example of quantitative testing at the enterprise level and how that brings value. At another smaller company, they did job onboarding and recruitment. And through user feedback, we were able to identify a completely overlooked pain point in the user journey. That was the main contribution to user drop-off, which was one of the primary KPIs. And through that, we were able to early on steer the project in a new direction that we knew would bring the results we were hoping to find. And then combining contextual studies and analytics tracking, we've also reduced abandonment for a nonprofit application that initially took 3+ hours, required multiple sessions, and we brought it down to 25% compared to that previous year. So that's just some examples of the great results we've seen user testing, both qualitative and quantitative, bring across our experiences. And we're hoping to share that with you all today. Anything to add from you two before we move to the next slide?
Let's roll.
Perfect. I'll let TJ speak to why should your business listen to us? Sometimes the hardest thing to get buy-in for is from the larger organization on user testing.
Great. Yeah, so sometimes the perspective of a business might be, hey, why should we invest money and resources into testing, both qualitative or quantitative or both? What's in it for us? And so the perspective here is that at the beginning of an initiative, the risk and uncertainty is very high. And so decisions made early on can really make a big impact, positive or negative, in the direction and outcome of your undertaking. And so the better information that you have, especially in the form of quantitative and qualitative research, the better decisions you're going to make early on before you're investing a lot of money, like development time, into the initiative. So it's just really essential for the organization to invest appropriately in research.
And so people often ask, like, where does quantitative and qualitative fit into the process? Many of us have probably pitched to our stakeholders, our clients, the British Design Council's famous double diamond. Oftentimes, there's a misconception that maybe qualitative or qualitative especially, only has a place on the left-hand side of things. As you're going to kind of see, like in our case studies, our pitch is that qualitative and quantitative loops appear throughout the process. They're not just for problem discovery, but they're also for vetting your solutions and continuing to test your product once it's out there. So if you've shown someone this diamond, you can say testing everywhere, every part of it.
All right, so now you've seen the high-level value of testing, getting down into the methodologies here of qualitative versus quantitative. How are we defining the difference? So everyone has their own approach here, but for us, quantitative is data-driven and data-driven testing. So it's whenever we use numbers to make design or business decisions. So you can collect quantitative data about a lot of different areas. It can be populations, user behaviors, key performance indicators. And some examples of quantitative testing are traditional A/B testing, when you have like a green button and a red button, you want to see which one people click more. It can even be multivariant testing. You've got a lot of different colors, so you want to see what people click more, and maybe you see like warm tone colors, people click more because it aligns with your brand. Some tools for quantitative testing is Optimizely, which integrates with your website, performs web analytics. Full Story is another web analytics tool that also helps with visualization of that data. But you can even go down to the granular level of surveys or impression testing and do really affordable, quick methods of getting some data on your concepts. Qualitative is the flip side of that. So it's anything that is not number driven. So this can be feedback directly from actual or potential users. So sometimes you have to approach a theoretical user base, sometimes you have access to your actual user base, and both can bring a lot of value. And this can include a variety of methods to understand attitudes, beliefs, motivations. Those are the sort of things you measure with qualitative testing. And some tools we see here a lot are user interviews are usually what comes immediately to mind for qualitative testing, but those can often be expensive or time intensive. So qualitative testing also includes things like surveys, diary studies, contextual studies, or even unmoderated user testing can bring a lot of great insights. So that is the what they are.
And it really is one plus the other equals success, right? So we might perhaps know that quantitatively someone is dropping out of the funnel 50% at this moment in the process. But the why is really key for us understanding. Is this a moment that is only happening here? The intersection of a user's motivation plus the appearance of this page is causing this interaction? Or is there something more generalizable here that we could be applying elsewhere and throughout the application? So the what is informative, but the why helps us see opportunities for potentially reusing this learning elsewhere. And that's why I kind of pitch suggest these two things really work in tandem. And it's when you combine the two that you're really able to say that learning can be used elsewhere throughout the application. And we might be able to reduce drop off in future funnels because we've done this.
Great. And just to reinforce from the business perspective, having both the what and the why behind behavior is just the most efficient way and effective way of driving decisions and reducing cost at the end of the day. It's also great to provide engineers and other stakeholders both perspectives, quant and qual. Sometimes stakeholders lean in towards one or the other depending on their perspective. So having both is, in my opinion, not just most effective to see both sides of things from the product perspective, but stakeholders are also reveal different perspectives from utilizing both.
All right, so jumping into some examples, how do these two methodologies combine at an actual company in a real use case? So here is an example from a client that we were recently on. This is something we actually did and implemented and saw great success with. Like everything in design, it's a circle. It is continually feeding into itself and improving itself. So starting with some context on this client, they were a large corporation, so at this higher level, and they hosted personal blogs and placed their own e-commerce CTAs on those blogs related to the content. So starting here, we got some qualitative user feedback from those blog owners that informed us of an potential improvement opportunity here. And their complaint was that the e-commerce CTAs that were related to the blog content but not owned by them were taking up too much room. They were big, they were bulky, they could be slimmed down. So with that feedback, we jumped into a quantitative A/B test. We designed several different versions of slimmer, more modern buttons. And we wanted to see how those would feed into our primary KPI, which was increasing conversion rate from these CTAs. So hopefully by slimming that down, meeting that user request, we would improve those conversion rates and modernize the platform. What happened though is our new modern buttons, we did not expect the results we got there. So we had the what of the data, and the winner was one that we didn't really think would win. And we were like, but why is that happening? So that's when we jumped back into qualitative testings. We had a big why question that we needed answered. So for this, we did the traditional user interviews where we presented potential users with our designs, and we asked them which one they preferred and learned why they preferred the one that the A/B testing had indicated. So what was great is that we were getting the same feedback from the qualitative that we were in the quantitative, that one of the variants was the big preference, the overall winner, everyone preferred it for the reasons that it was easier to read, it was bigger. And so then we were able to take those learnings and feed them into future quantitative A/B tests where the button style that won, we were able to apply it across the platform and then further increase conversion rate there. So I might have given it away a little bit, but here is our test. So on the left, we had the current design, the big buttons. You can see they're blocking a lot of the content. And then on the right, we have all of the modern, slimmer buttons that follow a lot of existing concepts, existing practices, and they took up a lot less room on the page. So like I mentioned, people preferred the bigger buttons here. We saw drastic decreases in not only conversion rate, but also click rate of the modern buttons, which surprised us all. We thought they were smaller, they were more modern, thought people would trust them more. And then when we went to do those user interviews, like I mentioned, people really liked the big buttons, even though they were clunky, because they were easier to see and easier to read. So, so I'll let TJ speak to how that then translated to some of the business initiatives following this test.
Great. Yeah, so understanding why this test failed was really, really helpful from the business perspective, because if we didn't know why, then we probably would have leaned into the icon approach. So one of the compromises in the design being shown is you have like big buttons that are easy to read and easy to press, or you have icons. And we really thought icons would make a difference in the performance. So knowing why, knowing that the icons weren't helpful and that the users preferred the larger buttons, prevented us from investing a lot more resources into testing different icons or icons in different places. So we were able to just kind of cease that train of effort and switch gears onto something else. And by the way, since this user testing was conducted, several times, every couple months, someone will have an idea of like, oh, why don't we put icons on these buttons? And we're able to then confidently say, yeah, great idea. We tested this, and we now have information from the users that this is just not as good as the larger buttons with the larger text.
I'm going to share another case study here. I hope you'll hopefully my storytelling is top notch because this deals with a lot of personal information. So I can't show the actual study, but I'll try to weave an interesting narrative through it. This study began with a tech impetus, which I think many of us are probably experiencing right now. AI, machine learning has become more affordable, more accessible. The company had a hypothesis that if we had people spending less time manually researching people's backgrounds and more time sitting with them face to face, we could increase our conversion rate. We already knew that face-to-face interactions were critical for this company. So we wanted to get our people in front of more people faster. And we hypothesized machines. Well, machine learning could help us get there. Maybe ChatGPT could. So we began with just kind of general user interviews, getting to know people's day-to-day. And really, one of the interesting insights that came out of that was one of the ultimate low points, when they're doing research is, if I find out the wrong thing about TJ, and then I say it to him in our face-to-face interaction, that is ultimately a very embarrassing interaction for me, the person who wanted to meet with you. And these people were very risk averse to that. They were very nervous about that because that would likely result in, not being able to convert this potential lead. But there was a tech impetus. So we took this insight and we were still going to go forge ahead with a pilot and see, could we provide some value and help these people to spend less time doing research? We leveraged our machine learning tool to begin surfacing data points collected on people. And we basically asked these people to continue doing their job as they always did. They would research this person, and we tracked quantitatively how often were they correcting data points that we were suggesting. And the answer was actually quite often. It's really interesting, if from a machine learning model, you say 80%, 90%, that is stellar from a statistically, we're able to get this information. But for these face-to-face interactions, people's threshold was much higher. They needed to be 99% sure. And when the computer said they were sure, that didn't align with their level of certainty. So then we, the next step in this was we took that information on the quantitative study. We set up a qualitative diary study, which was basically we would check in with folks. They had to do this every day as part of their job, and we would just send them a study over Slack and say, hey, did you use the tool today? How was the data? And, we kind of used a metaphor. We gave it a cute name, like, would you hire the tool to join your team today? And people would say yes. They were like enthusiastic, like it's doing a good enough job. They perceived that they would bring them onto the team. This followed further tech investment. We saw some positive data here. So we rolled out the tool. We rolled out an enhanced integrated tool for surfacing these findings. And we just tracked how people would, we gave them two options. You could create a blank slate and start gathering the data individually, or you could start from this template that you said you would hire, that we thought was really good. It was quantitatively pretty accurate from a machine learning standpoint. And over time, people just trended back to the manual. And so, to kind of get back to what TJ was saying, like, what is some of the value of these cycles? We saved the business an immense amount of money and investment in this tool that we found that these recruiters would not use, because the ultimate decider was, I wanted to ensure that I had a positive interaction and I was confident in the information I was bringing to that face-to-face engagement. So the business invested in other ways to increase those amount of face-to-face connections rather than using machine learning. So maybe ChatGPT is not going to solve the world. I don't know. But interesting case study of how even a negative finding through this process can help positively affect your bottom line.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. All right, so now we've shown you the what they are, the value they hold, and how they're implemented at the actual organization level. Hopefully we've convinced everyone that doing qualitative and quantitative testing both is incredibly important and useful to any organization. But how can you actually implement this at your organization? No matter what level of user testing you have, especially as a designer, I like to say you can always do more. So we're going to look at some of the outputs and implementations of these types of testing. So starting with qualitative, this one is always hard if you don't have existing practices. How do you measure qualitative outputs? You have all these different opinions and motivations and abstract information. How do you turn those into actionable, targetable insights? It's not easy all the time. Oftentimes you have to adapt what you want to know to what you have learned. So some tools we have found really helpful are Miro. You can see there using Miro, we took a bunch of insights from some user interviews and affinity bucketed them. And then by grouping them based off of some of our key questions, we were able to identify patterns from all of these different opinions. And that led us to, okay, for this behavior we were trying to observe, people are more often finding the thing we want them to find. So that's been successful. Or sometimes we'll see, hey, like people are oftentimes getting distracted by this thing over here and we don't want that to happen. How can we go fix that? And that becomes a next step to put into your backlog. So it's a lot of insights. So you can see positive, negatives, neutrals. Sometimes people just really don't care about something you're really excited about. Negative, sometimes people are performing an action you really don't want them to do. But really how you have to format this is based off of what you're hoping to learn from that and then identifying the patterns that answer the questions and problems you're hoping to solve. Another example of that is down there. I just used a Google Sheet to do some heat mapping. We were trying to target really specific behaviors, and seeing those colors helped us identify what behaviors were being performed, what behaviors weren't being performed. And that is a great support, especially if you have an extensive A/B testing system. A great way to look at the why, or the people aren't clicking on something. We don't have numbers on that. So that is some of the literal outputs you can get there.
You know, I think Maren put it very succinctly. Think about the tool and think about it early. Qualitative research ops, I have found to be, is honestly one of the largest barriers, I think, to adoption in organizations that aren't already using qualitative research or aren't sharing it effectively. If you haven't used a tool like Dovetail, it's one I've used and I really enjoy. There are other options out there. What it allows you to do is to share the entirety of a qualitative study, such as an interview or a video, a usability test, and you are able to tag it and share it with the larger organization. I fundamentally think that if we are more effective at sharing our qualitative studies, it enables the entire organization to more readily kind of see the value of the work we're doing, right? You've conducted a study with someone, you've interviewed a person, you've derived your insights, but that might actually be helpful to the problem the sales team is searching down the line, trying to solve down the line. You know, so again, qualitative research ops are a really effective way to help your organization kind of reuse and see the value of these sort of studies.
All right, and then jumping to quantitative, the other side of the coin, quantitative outputs are a lot easier to understand and visualize because they are numbers. And we are definitely not experts in data analysis. There are some great teams out there that specialize and focus on that, and some great tools out there that focus on that. But here's a great example of some quantitative output that we didn't just get the winner from, but we were able to gain several other insights from these numbers. And if you're looking at this and confused by some of the language here, what we were testing was literally tree images. We were trying to increase the donations for a tree planting organization, and we were seeing what sort of image on the purchase page would help motivate people to contribute to this organization most. So here we can see sapling B image people preferred the most. So that's sort of our clear winner there. But again, we don't know why, and that's maybe something we could go and do some qualitative testing or impression testing on. And then at the very bottom, sapling D underperformed relative to all the other options. So, and then what we learned from that is we've got a winner, we've got a loser, and then there are no specific trends there. We have saplings at the top and bottom of the chart, and we were sort of testing baby trees, people planting trees, families with trees, and we didn't see any preference in terms of what the content was, which told us that it was the specific image we had found that was driving the most conversion. So this is just one example of quantitative output. You can get very in the weeds with all of these numbers, but it's a lot easier to measure and point to a winner and bring to your stakeholders saying, here's what we learned, here are the numbers. So this is what a quantitative output looks like.
Yeah, and quantitative research ops, I would say, are far more mature at the average organization. Business intelligence tools, if you're working in an organization that has products, you might even have something. Even the most basic thing like Google Analytics is a solid foundation for this. This space is a little bit more mature, but there's other ways to kind of scale your quantitative research operations. Mixpanel, where you can configure funnels and drive and create simplified charts so people can see insights in real time. Scaling this is a little bit easier just because it is more mature, and if you're not even using Google Analytics, I bet your organization has Excel spreadsheets with some sort of data in it. Don't discount those as foundations for your quantitative research to maybe hopefully help kick off your next qualitative study.
All right, so we've seen some ops advice, but how can you start doing this wherever your organization's at? Maybe you have extensive user testing and you're just motivated to go and do more. Maybe you haven't had the chance to do any user testing at your organization. So how can you do this? Step one is always, what questions are you trying to answer? By identifying what hypotheses you were testing, this will inform what methods you were using. Are you trying to find the why of something? Are you trying to find the what of something? A little bit of both. That'll really tell you what sort of testing you need to start looking into. And then to narrow in on that, knowing what your budget is for both time and cost. We've mentioned a few times that stuff like user interviews can be expensive, both in the time investment and the cost investment, depending on how much access to your user base you have. But there are definitely ways to do user testing, both qualitative and quantitatively, quickly and affordably. One of my favorite tools to use is UserBob. It's often overlooked. Not many people know about it, but it is incredibly affordable. They have a great range of testers to give you feedback. It's unmoderated, so you just submit a prototype, let it out into the world, and then people go through, try to perform tasks, answer questions. So you could use that to do even 1-minute impression testing, comparing like version A to version B and seeing which one people perform a task on faster or better or whatever you happen to be looking for.
Yeah, and Short, the best advice for building up an ops program around this is start where you are, find out what analytics you might already have, and use that to inspire a single conversation with a customer. Start a couple, build up the habit. Make it a more recurring thing, but it's okay to start small. It doesn't have to be a fully scaled program with a beautiful dovetail and mix panel to be effective for helping to improve your product. Start where you are.
Great. And definitely find an ally in product. As I've stated many times, it's definitely worth the investment to get both the qual and the quant supporting decisions. There's a strong ROI. And another note is to not give up. Sometimes if you just want to start talking with 1 or 2 customers, it could take a while to get a hold of customers based on some organizational barriers that might exist if it's not something that you regularly do.
Yep, design should not exist in a vacuum. TJ has helped us get a lot of user testing, both performing the testing, getting buy-in for that from stakeholders, as well as getting those insights out into the larger organization. So this is a full team effort for sure. And it looks like we don't have much time for questions, but we're going to throw this up here. Feel free to reach out to Crafted or to any of us on LinkedIn or other social medias. We're always happy to do virtual coffee or in-person coffee if you happen to be in the Denver area. We love chatting with everyone and getting to know your stories at your companies.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Well, that was really good. I think it tied in perfectly with Maren's talk as well. So it was a nice connection there. So thank you for sharing.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
You're right. Unfortunately, we are out of time for questions, but I did have one that I'm going to post it into the Slack channel. And it comes back to kind of, you mentioned it a few times. Oh, we've already tested this and this is the answer. But sometimes technology changes. So I'm sure now, Aaron, if you try it with ChatGPT, it will work this time. So I guess the question I'll post in there is, when is the right time to revisit something, and how do you know when your research has gone stale? Would be the kind of question.
Great question. I'm on UXDX, so I'd be glad I'll answer it on the channel there.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you very much. And if anybody has any questions, just send them in, and we'll copy those onto the Slack group as well. And Aaron and the rest of the team, I'll invite them to make sure they answer them for you. So, but thanks once again for sharing.
Thank you all for having us. Cheers.
Great. So that actually brings us to the end of our session for today. But I hope you enjoyed the talks. And just to reiterate what everybody has been kind of saying, at UXDX, our mission is to help move to product teams. So we believe it's product, UX, design, and dev, and they all need to be working together. So that's why at our conferences, we invite speakers from across all of the different kind of disciplines. Because if you really want to work together, I don't get how people try to learn separately and then somehow think that it's all going to magically come together. So we bring everybody together to understand what each other is doing and how everybody contributes. So our next big conference that's coming up is in less than 4 weeks now, in New York. So if you like what we're doing and you like that concept, we'll have 500 people there, 25 speakers. There's actually 12 workshops. And if that's a little bit short notice, we also host an event in October in Dublin. So if you want to take a nice trip to Europe, we'd love to invite you and welcome you there. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing you at the next online event. And thank you and good night.